Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Network podcast, brought to you by PlayNFC.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our High Stakes Fantasy Network podcast. I'm your host, Greg Ambrosius, and this week is NFBC Champions Podcast Week, where I'm going to interview 5 of our defending national champions. We just interviewed NFBC main event champion Clark Olson, and our second interview of the night will be with Steve Weimer, our 2024 NFBC Draft Champions National Championship winner. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks a lot. Happy to be here. Look forward to talking with you.
Absolutely. Good to have you. I mentioned on Twitter that we have one thing in common. We both shoveled our roofs at home yesterday. We've gotten 20 inches of snow here in the last 8 days in Wisconsin. We had none before last Saturday, and we've got 20 inches in the last 8 days. So I'm out there raking all that off my roof. Then I talk to you, and you said you were doing the same thing in upstate New York. How many inches over there?
Oh, I'm not even sure exactly. We had well over a foot, probably 2 feet on the ground before a big storm. That kind of shut everything down the last couple of days. It's definitely over 3 feet in my yard. I'm not sure how much over. I don't really want to find out. I go out there as little as possible kind of these days.
Well, it looked like it was up to your waist with that picture you took with the big check. So that was a lot of snow for sure. But people ask, why do you shovel the snow off of your roof? And like I try to tell them, when it gets wet, that's a whole lot of hundreds of tons on your roof, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of weight. Yeah. So and it builds up too. Like, I don't know, at least I guess you've had a clear roof before this one, but if for us, like if you don't stay on top of it, then, eventually you get 3 feet up there and I don't trust it.
Hey, folks, it's a good workout, too. I was sweating my butt off yesterday up there raking snow. So there we go. So, okay, enough about weather. But you said you're so far up north in upstate New York that you actually fly out of Montreal, huh, when you come to Vegas?
Yeah, it's still like a 2-hour drive, but we're kind of in the middle of nowhere. But that's the closest, I guess, non-nowhere place. It's the closest big city, yeah.
That's the slogan of Iola, Wisconsin. We're in the middle of nowhere. That's for sure. All right. So this was your first national title in the NFBC, but it wasn't the only thing you got right in 2024. You won 11 different league titles last year. Now, you've been playing the NFBC since 2014. This was your best year. So what clicked last year that made it such a success?
It's a boring answer, but I don't think much changed. I actually have like a document. I try to like keep track of what I do and so I can look back and see what worked or not. And there weren't any like major changes. I think it's just a matter of like, if you have a good method and you play enough teams, then eventually like things can fall in the right place. Like a good strategy, a good method can get you to the top third of a league or an overall, I think. And then, with the right breaks from there, you can maybe get all the way to the top. But yeah, for me, it's just a matter of like fine tuning, no big changes, just kind of plugging away and putting in the work, and eventually you kind of get lucky.
I was talking with Clark, who's been with us since 2004, and it seems like there is a learning curve in the NFBC, whether it's learning FAB or in this case, learning 50 rounds of a draft, 750 players. You've had, good success every year, getting better each year. Do you think there's a learning curve when it comes to playing in the NFBC?
For sure. I was looking back at my historical teams. Like the first one I did okay. I don't even know. Maybe I cashed or something that gave me some confidence. The next year I did 2 teams and they were like 11th and 14th or something like that. And then like you gradually get the hang of it.
Yeah.
And that's just the draft champions. I think that's a huge learning curve to like handle that huge player pool and have everything that you need, on opening day. I think FAB is a completely different learning curve, and I'm like lower on that one. I definitely don't feel as confident in FAB. But I do think like there's so many resources now that you can shortcut the learning curve more than like when I started in 2014, 2015, whatever. And then there probably were some resources, but I wasn't aware of them. But now like, every podcast, an article and there's Discords, but like I think a greater percentage of players are aware of the NFBC and the resources that are kind of focusing on those strategies. So if you pay good attention and put in the work there, you can learn by like listening to a few podcasts and reading some articles and thinking about it rather than learning by like having a painful kind of year like I did my second time around.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. The environment has certainly changed and for the better, especially when it comes to the NFBC. All right, last year we had a record year in the draft champions format. It's still hard to believe. 5,010 teams we had in this format. This is the first format you picked when you joined the NFBC back in 2014. What do you like best about this draft and old format? It has no fab, draft 50 players. That's the team you have all year.
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is that it frees you up on Sunday nights. So it's not a fab. And it lets you save those for other leagues. But there are obviously like some distinct kinds of strategies. It motivates you, requires you to go really deep into the player pool. It's the only really impetus I have to like study prospects, which is, kind of fun. And to think about these really like what seem like small, like who's going to be the short side platoon third baseman on the White Sox kind of thing. That if you really are into baseball, like no one else cares about it, but it's a fun kind of thing to try to predict who's going to have the combination of skills and opportunity there. So it just raises really like more questions, I guess, or decision points than you see in pretty much any other league. And if you're playing this kind of game, you probably like making those kinds of decisions. Not everyone likes to make whatever 50 of them, but for at least a crazy minority of us, it's I think the most enjoyable format.
Well, it's not a minority because we had 5,010 teams last year. And again, I wanted, can you rationalize, I mean, beating 5,009 teams to win this? It is pretty incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't really. I mean, as you know, like I got second in the draft champions like 2 other times, like finished second overall, and those were smaller fields, I'm sure, but still really big. And I thought for sure, like that's my chance. Like you'll never get close to the top again. Like you blew it. So when that team kind of hung up there, towards the middle of the season, I was surprised. I didn't really think I was going to do that again, and then just didn't want to blow it again. Like so, just didn't want to fall short for a third time. So yeah, it was a very pleasant surprise, but definitely surprising to kind of have another one that had the pieces
Well,
fall.
ask Clark the same question. He had been close, fourth in the main event before winning it, and he's seventh in the main event. He was in the top 12 a lot. You were in the same way. You finished second twice. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But is that frustrating? Is it gratifying? What is it when you finish second instead of first in an overall?
Well, now it's like part of the narrative arc, right? Like, because now I've had redemption. Like, if that's as close as I ever got, then probably it would have been frustrating.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme, I think both of those teams. No, sorry, one of them did have a chance. I think towards the end. That's right. In 2018, I think it did come down like to that was actually a playoff, like a game 163 situation.
Oh, okay.
And I had a chance, I think. The other one was like, I was second, but first was out of sight. And I was just in the moment, I was just happy to not fall further. Yeah. But yeah, looking at it in the long run, if I'd gotten those 2 seconds and then never got close again, like that would have been a little disappointing.
Yeah. All right. So draft champions, like we say, is 15 teams, 50 players, no fab. That's a total of 750 players being drafted. Now, folks, I'm in one right now. We're like in round 46, and I don't even know any of these players. I mean, I don't dive in like I used to when I was a magazine editor. But for guys like Steve, they love that part of it. Again, no free agency. It's an extremely popular format. It's one we created in 2011, and it's just been fantastic. So, Steve, you've been very good at this. What's the key to building a championship team in this DC format?
I mean, it's the obvious and kind of common answer, but it is, I think, drafting for depth, like having kind of contingency plans because you're going to have injuries, you're going to have some role changes you didn't expect, and thinking through the best way to deploy kind of your resources, those 50 picks to cover up as many as those potential holes as possible. I think is the big part of it, but also just like really being consistent and careful about setting lineups, because it's the kind of situation that if you draft for depth and have coverage, then you can make up a lot of ground in these leagues, because you get to August and the teams you're chasing, maybe they didn't have the right depth and they've got 3 zeros in their lineup or something, or they're just not paying attention for a couple of weeks, and you have full lineups. A lot of it does come down, I think, to like those counting stats and piling up the volume of at bats and innings. So like planning for it and then like actualizing and carrying out that plan by just being mindful of those lineups and getting as many active players, getting as many at bats as you can.
Yep. So what stat category is the hardest to fill in this format? There's no fab, so you really have to be balanced when you draft. But what is that one stat category? Does it seem like a saves, a stolen bases? What?
For me, it saves. I
Yeah.
mean, someone's getting them, I guess. But I was looking at my team from years. It's almost every year saves is my lowest, like average category. Um, Part of that, I think, is a strategic decision. So the root issue is it's really hard to predict who's going to be getting saves in August,
Right.
like when you're drafting in the previous November.
Yeah.
There's a lot of turnover in terms of personnel and injuries and skills and so forth. But then the strategic element is like, given that, what are you going to do? And there comes a point at which it may not be worth investing too much in that resource, given the volatility. It's the category on the pitching side that is least tightly correlated with overall success. It gets kind of off doing its own thing a little bit. Like starters do well at the other four categories. Closers can contribute in those others, but not to the same extent. So it's a hard game. You have to make sacrifices. You can't get every player you want. You can't get every stat you want. And in some cases, it can make sense to sacrifice that one, I think.
Yeah. I said we started this with 45 rounds, and after the first year, I
Mhm.
remember Sean Childs said, "That's not enough. We need to go 50 because you can't get enough catchers. You can only get maybe 3 or 4 catchers." I was like, "What? We need more? 5 more rounds? Are you kidding me?"
Mhm.
And that actually was the right move, right? I think 50 is the right number. So I got to ask you, with 50, how many catchers do you shoot for, and how many pitchers do you go for then?
So I almost always get four catchers.
Yeah.
And then pitchers like 22 to 24. I know some people go even more. I tend, I think, to go a little bit earlier on pitchers than most people. So maybe I can afford to do one or two fewer at the end.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, that's pretty much the formula. Like I've got it mapped out. Not so much a plan, but I just keep track of my tendencies. Like it's usually like
Yeah.
8 by round 20 and 12 by round 30 and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's just, I think, the system that works for me.
All right, sounds good. Let's talk about last year's national championship team. You drafted this team in late October. It was
Mhm.
one of the first drafts of the season. It's amazing that you could draft almost a perfect team that early in the offseason. So, what advantages are there of drafting early for someone who wants to do that?
Yeah. So no like sane person has like fully prepared for the
Right.
next season in October. So there's opportunities there. Like you're not going to be fully prepared either, but you can just be ahead of your competitors. That's all that matters. So there's opportunities to identify like players that project well for the next year, but other people just haven't noticed it yet. Like
Hmm.
so, that their stock is going to rise as the draft season continues. So that's like, I mean, that's the big advantage. I think it outweighs for me anyway, it outweighs the disadvantage of like injuries and things like that. Because like yeah, they come up
Yep.
over the course of the offseason from October to like if I was drafting now, there's a few people that if I have drafted and probably got injured, but we don't get a lot of that news throughout the winter. And injuries can happen like to anyone and
Yep.
it's kind of random. Whereas if you put in the prep, you can seize that advantage, like a bigger share of that advantage, and do it that way. So I definitely have noticed I tend to do better in the earlier drafts.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a give and take, like everything, but there's definitely good opportunities there.
So, Stephen Goodwin has said that you drafted the perfect team. You didn't have a weakness anywhere, and you finished with 96.8% of all available points. Again, this is 5,010 teams. That's by far the highest winning percentage in our 14-year history of this contest. You also finished with 146 and a half league points. So I have to ask you, was this the perfect team? And if so, how the hell did it happen?
So I think it's about as perfect as anyone can expect to get.
Yeah.
Still, there are mistakes. I keep track of like the mistakes. Like I keep track of decisions that were close calls and didn't turn out well. If I think that's going to be the at the end of the season, it might be a difference maker. I like to have something to like look back at and kind of beat myself up over. And I have those for this team as well. Like a roto full season team, like it's comprised of thousands of decisions, like in the draft and then all these lineups, and no way that you're ever going to get all of them right. Uh, but like what's nice about it is that if you just are making a little bit better decisions then even though the error bar around each one is pretty wide, like in the aggregate, you should like the edge should emerge.
Yeah.
So like this one, I think, did the same kind of methods as always, made the same kind of decisions, but just veered towards the positive with that error bar on a really large number of them.
Absolutely, for
yeah.
sure. All right, let's look at this draft from the 2 spot. You had the second pick. You started with Bobby Witt, and then you got Shohei Ohtani at pick 29. Now we can talk about Ohtani, but hey, listen, Strider was going 2, maybe not in October, but a lot of people, you could have gone a lot of different ways there at 2, and you hit the right one with Bobby Witt, right?
Yeah, definitely no complaints there. I think he was a pretty clear 2 for me all draft seasons. I remember. I don't think I had a lot of like early picks in DCs, but I think he would have been the clear 2. So that's just even right there. Like obviously there's be huge luck about getting Ohtani. We can talk about that at 29, but like dodging a bullet by not getting the first pick as it turns out.
Right.
But yeah, the Ohtani thing was obviously a huge bit of luck. I'm pretty sure that was his max pick for
Was
all
it?
DCs.
Yeah.
Fittingly, I also had his min pick for all DCs because I took him second overall in the Rob DiPietro August league. So before his Tommy John, I took him second overall as a pitcher.
Yeah.
And then I also got him 29th overall in October. And that's when, like, this is another of these opportunities. Like, you can take advantage of uncertainty, and there's uncertainty about whether he was going to be ready for opening day as a hitter.
Right. Yeah.
So he was going around 1920 in those drafts. And then just, in the room that I was in, I guess they were especially worried about him, and he fell all the way to 29.
29. But again, he was in the second round, even in Vegas in March, because of that was the gambling situation more than anything. But certainly a great pick. So you start out with Bobby Witt, Shohei Ohtani. I mean, very, very good. Then he went Corbin Burns at pick 32, Raisel Iglesias and Tarek Skubal at pick 62. Let's talk about Skubal because he moved up an awful lot as we got closer, actually 2 or 3 rounds. Did you see a breakout season there, or you just knew that was a bargain at that point?
I think it was more a bargain at that point. If I saw like the breakout coming, I would have had him on a lot more teams.
Yeah.
I did pay a lot of attention. The previous year, I picked him up when he came back from injury, like whatever it was, like August or so, on a lot of my fab leagues, and he was like my big fab purchase. So I paid attention and saw how good he was down the stretch. So that's one of the nice things too about doing those early drafts is all that information is fresh in your mind. Like I just saw Skubal dominate for 2 months, so it's a lot easier to click his name in a draft.
All right, the hits kept coming. Ketel Marte in round 8, Michael King in round 10, Teoscar Hernandez in round 13. How about Mason Miller in round 20, Brenton Doyle in round 27? I mean, you were in on these guys early. What was it, the prep that you saw from these guys? Did you think they'd have bust out seasons, or what on all those guys?
The only 2 I can really like claim to be like fully in on, I guess, were Teoscar and Brenton Doyle. I think they might have been my 2 most rostered players on DCs all year. So that I can kind of claim some advantage. The others are a bit of luck. Ketel Marte, I think, is just falling value. It's just happened to fall to me. Michael King was, had good skills, and that's another one where people didn't really realize how successful he was, and how well it could transport over to a full season starting. And then Mason Miller is just like, that's a bit of a wild card. It's like he's one of those pitchers that's actually great for DCs because at that point you didn't know what his role was going to be entirely, but whether even if he's a middle reliever at that point in the draft, like starter, middle reliever, closer, whatever it is, he's going to be good. He's going to give you good innings, and those are valuable. In a DC.
He's giving you strikeouts somewhere, that's for sure. So in around 20, you can't argue with that, around 300. So, all right, more hits. Let's just get the good ones out of the way. Jared Jones in round 32. I mean, that was a hell of a pick. Tyler McGill, round 33. No idea there. Ronaldo Lopez in round 41. All right, are those smart dart throws or lucky dart throws?
Mostly lucky, kind of smart. It actually, like going through the list, what it reminds me of, or like brings home to me, is like there's different bases for like a lot of these picks, and in DCs, like you're not usually going to have like one decision-making method, like just look at projections and use that for every pick that you make. Especially as you're going deeper in these leagues, you need to find other bases for choosing players because their projections are going to be terrible. So like Jared Jones was like prospect people said he had just dominated in the fall league and he was probably going to go straight to the majors. I think like James Anderson said that. I trust it if James Anderson says it. So nothing about projections, nothing about scouting. I never seen him pitch or anything, but it's like if it's good enough for James, it's good enough for me. And then Miguel and Ronaldo Lopez are just like pitchers that have flash skills. I don't even think we knew at that point that Lopez was going to be a starter. I think I was drafting him as a potential, like he could close somewhere. His skills as reliever had been good enough that maybe he gets signed to be a closer. So it's a lot of luck that he had a role that I didn't even foresee. But the basis of the pick is just like someone who can, get people out. And eventually that can, more often than not, that'll manifest into some good value, especially if it's that late in the draft. I think it was like round 40 or something.
Yep, 41, definitely. I wish I would have seen Jared Jones in the Arizona Fall League. I don't remember seeing him out there at all. So, yeah, that's a good pick there in round 32. All right, we got a lot of guys in the lobby right now because they're trying to pick your brain. They want to get the good ones. So let's throw one bad one out here. You said you made some bad decisions. Just to prove that you were human, you picked Anthony Rendon in round 35. Now, was that a curveball to the league, or did you actually think he was good at one point?
I think he was good at one point.
He was, yes.
I think I had a fair amount of them, actually. The thinking there being like the contract would guarantee the playing time, and he's had been good. It could come back. But like I didn't obviously account for the injury propensity or the fact that he's just not interested in playing. That's not something I've ever really considered in drafting anyone. But I guess now that should be a column in the spreadsheet. It's like, does a person have like,
does he like baseball? Does he like
baseball?
That should be one category, right? Or does he just love money? That's it. I guess he doesn't like baseball very much. All right. So let's talk about this. You're the 14th different DC overall champion. You've been close twice, like you said. 14 years of this, 14 different champions. Not uncommon like other contests that we have, but this one, because of the sheer number of teams, is going to be very hard for anybody to repeat, I think. What makes it so hard to win again? And do you think you could possibly win this again?
I won't. I think it's a statistical near impossibility. I guess the biggest part of it is just the number of teams. Yeah. But I do wonder, I was trying to think about it, that like since there's not Fab, maybe it's even less likely to repeat because Fab adds even more decisions. There's more places for skill to win out, right, in a Fab league than in a DC, where you're drafting and then you're making the lineup decisions, and those are hugely important. But there's just one less element of skill. So I just think in general, like skill, talent, hard work in fantasy baseball, they need a lot of decisions. Like they win out in the aggregate, and there's more places for that to happen in a Fab league than a draft like this.
No, that's a good point for sure. So you talked earlier about this, but I wanted to bring it up again. Your friend Rob DiPietro, who's in the lobby right now, he won this overall title in 2020. I know you talk with him a lot. You're on his podcasts. And we talk these podcasts. There's so many NFBC-centric podcasts that we're not involved with, but we love it. It's just mushrooming the interest in the NFBC. And like you said, helping with prep of drafts, helping during the preseason, building other communities from the NFBC. How much have you seen it change in the last 10 years, and how much good has it been for our community?
Yeah, it's a lot of change, even in the last 5 years, I think. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very good for the game. I think the overall level of competition is significantly higher and is, still increasing. It's annoying. Like it makes it harder to find and maintain any kind of edge. Things that I think were an edge before are now common knowledge, and everyone does them. So it's ultimately like, yes, it's annoying because it's fun to win, but it's fun to win a challenging game, and it does make it more challenging that you have to keep trying to find new ways to succeed, and that people are openly and actively, like smart people, are discussing strategies and things that you can consider and analyzing what worked and what didn't work. And that gives you, it spurs you, gives you some ideas, but also other people have access to it. So you have to consider how they're taking it into account.
So I trust you didn't know any of our NFBC guys before you joined this. Now you're on, I'm sure, text threads, and you've got good friends and such like that. I mean, how has this changed even your personal life, since you've joined the NFBC?
Yeah, some of my best friends are, people who share this passion for baseball and for fantasy baseball, and definitely wouldn't have known them without out these leagues, and then the live events obviously add like a whole other element to that, to actually like
Yeah.
put names to faces and hang out like outside of an online draft room or chat room or anything like that.
So how'd you get involved in fantasy baseball to start? Was this a high school, a college thing, or
Yeah,
whatever?
I think high school.
Mhm.
I'm not sure when I first started. A lot of like ESPN and Yahoo leagues for a while.
Yeah.
I remember starting a league. This was college, must have been like 1999. I started a league like A-Rod, Jeter, and Omar, like 3 shortstops, and thinking I was like had like really like hamstrung the rest of the league because they weren't going to be able to fill their shortstop position. So definitely kind of did it probably every year, big throughout, but not super seriously
Yeah.
until a few years into the NFBC.
Cool, cool. So Paul Sporer asked us right here, what kind of volume do you do? I mean, I've looked at your team pages. You're not excessive by any stretch of the and in fact, with your DCs, I mean, you haven't done one since the middle of January, and I think that's kind of your history, isn't it? Or talk about that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to cut back a little bit. It
Okay.
was like 15 a year. I think I'm down out of 10 this year. And that's plenty. That's manageable. And still like, yeah, it's still fun. Like, and there's enough legs I can keep them straight in my mind, and know what's going on with each. I did give into temptation and join. I'm in the a 1K DC right now. We're in like around 40 or so, and then I am doing the Beat Rob one on Saturday. But for the most part, yeah, this is about the time. I just did my OC CLQ team last night,
Okay.
so I'm done with 12 team leagues, and it's the time when, as soon as this 1K DC wraps up, I just want to start thinking about 15 team fab leagues and how to best prepare for them, because obviously there's a lot of overlap, but there's distinct strategies and valuations and things like that. So shifting gears to that, plus trying to keep up with what's going on in spring training and like the rest of life, like shoveling snow off your roof and so forth, it is enough that it would be hard, I think, to maintain like doing well on DCs at the same time.
Well, like I said earlier, you won 11 league titles last year. You won a main event league title, a RotoWire online championship league title, a draft champions league title, a 500 DC auction league title, and some gladiator league titles. You are being more successful in multiple formats than I remember you in past years. How are you expanding your knowledge that way and getting better in all these formats?
Part of it is like taking advantage of those resources we were talking about before, especially in a place like the 12 team league, which is a different mindset. It doesn't fit me as well. Like being bolder, more like open to risk and shooting for upside is not kind of the way I naturally would play, which is probably why I gravitate towards the DCs. So like learning from those people that are successful in that format, and then trying to adapt at least some extent in that direction, both in my thinking and like the formal methods and systems and spreadsheets and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. So you talk about 12 team and 15 team. What categories harder in 15, let's say, than 12? And what is the benefits of 12 versus 15?
I don't really know if I play enough 12s to know for sure. I think this is correct. It's my understanding that like in the 12, you really like every line of position, you need more out of it. So like just it's more like the classic, I think, fantasy baseball where it's like you just need your big sluggers and to load up on them at the beginning of the draft. Just get as many big, like 100 run, 100 RBI, 30 homer guys as possible. Whereas in the draft champions, that's going to be, there's 15 teams, they get spread out more, and you can make up if you don't have those stats coming from the one lineup spot, you can make up for it because everyone's just going to be thinner throughout. So if you have depth, that can cover your outfield spots in July, then you can make up for those 3 homers or 5 homers you didn't have because you went with the pitcher early. So that's my general understanding, is to like go, more upside, go hitting early, but I'm definitely still learning the OC rope, something I wouldn't have gotten into at all if it weren't for the CLQ. I did a few years ago, but I'd like the 15 team format more, but Toby made me do a 12 team league. So now I have to try to figure out how to do those well.
Well, that's a good point. So you were dominant over so many formats last year that you earned a spot in our Champions League qualifier championship. Now, for those that don't know what CLQ is, I mean, kudos to Toby Guavin and everybody else that came up with this idea, but you take one main event team, one draft champions team, and one online championship team. And those 3 teams are comprised, you're actually watching 30 different stats each morning, I think, which is kind of fun in the overall there as well. And there's just a $250 side pot. Well, last year we had 201 teams. We've got a $50,000 pot right now, 30,000 to first place. And all of you guys, the top 15 finishers last year, are going to Las Vegas and doing an auction league, paying the top 3 from that auction league. It's going to be fantastic. And just I got to ask you, I mean, how cool is it being one of the 15 that are going there, no entry fee, and you got a chance to win $30,000?
Yeah, that's amazing. The no entry fee thing is great. It changes the calculus of leagues this year. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it'll get a lot of attention. It'll get huge amounts of attention from everyone in it. I expect it completely to be the hardest league I'm ever in, and the most competitive one, where you have like people that are really good, and not just, they didn't just have one good team. They had to have 3 good teams to get in there. So they're consistent. They're going to be highly motivated because of the attention it gets, as well as the prize pot. And I think it's going to be a fight. I think every point is going to be a scrap. So I haven't really begun. That's part of what I need to do, is thinking about how to prepare for that, because it is a slightly different beast, I think. But it's going to be a very fun challenge. I think a very challenging, fun time.
All 15 finalists are coming to Las Vegas, Park MGM, Friday night, March 21st, 4 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to have a live stream. There are live podcasts going on at that time. We'll have a separate room for the podcasts. Anybody that's not drafting that day, come on in. I'll have some beer in there. You can see the big auction board there as well. I mean, you want to talk about excelling in all different formats and being the best of everybody. You got to win a 12-teamer or do very well in a 12-teamer. Got to do well in a 15-teamer with Fab, 15-teamer without Fab. And then you go and do an auction league, a totally different format against those 15-teamers. Now, you haven't done a whole lot of auction leagues live, I don't believe. What's the thought process now doing a whole totally different format for all the money in the kitty there?
Yeah, it's nice. I've done 2 live auctions. I think, if I remember correctly, I got second in each of them. So I feel pretty confident. I think the way that I play ought to lend well here. I'm not sure. I need to think it through. I'm a pretty safe, spread the risk kind of person. And I don't know how the people are going to go for it in this Champions League, whether it's you go all out and try to win, or I think that there's a lot of people in there that haven't played any auctions on the NFBC format, at least. So we have no idea how they're going to approach it. So I think it is a great kind of cherry on the top that does bring in another element of strategy, another set of skills. You have to be good at the 3 things to get in, and then good at what I think is the epitome, the highest form of fantasy baseball is the auction. So I think it's the good way to round it off and kind of crown that champion.
Yeah, this is one where, I mean, really, as a player, you don't have any risk. I mean, you're in here now with no entry fee, and you may want to just go all out and get 2 big studs if you want, or someone like you may spread the wealth, and you're going to have a top 3 team based on that. I mean, there could be 15 different strategies going into this baby.
It's it's going to be really interesting. I'm hoping, I don't know, to get some insider information as people like Rob start. I know he's planning to interview the people, and I see an idea of how they're approaching it, and whether I can trust them. But I hear in the podcast.
No, I think it's going to be a good format. And again, this is a contest that was devised by our players, brought to us. When I first heard it, I thought the concept was good, but I really didn't understand it. I mean, I honestly really needed to read Rob's explanation to get a hold of it, and then thought, oh, wow, this could be great. And not only that, it could get some guys that haven't done 12-teamers before into that format. And there's some people who have done 12-teamers who have never done the main event. So I think the crossover has helped our contests. It's helped the players. And I think all year long, that contest, I think Rob is going to feature it. He had featured it leading up to this. So I think you guys are going to get a lot of publicity out of this as well.
Yeah, I hope so. I think it does add another element of strategy, another it keeps your teams interesting. My main event qualifier was not going to cash, and it was pretty clear, fairly early on. But I cared about it just as much as any other team because it was the CLQ, and even the teams that are in the running for the league, it's just another element of strategy. Like, how do you prioritize when you have a choice to make of what's good for the CLQ element of your team and what's good for the league, or also even the overall. And if you play fantasy baseball, like, what's fun about it is like making decisions, forming strategies, and seeing how they play out, and it just kind of magnifies that. There's more elements of strategy, and also like they're kind of higher stakes at some level, like, because you want to show that, in this contest is getting a lot of attention. You want to show that you're among the best.
Yep, absolutely. So you first joined the NFBC in 2014. Folks, we already had 10 years in, so trust me, you can join anytime and be successful. But, I just got to ask you, you were in your mid-30s when you came there. You said you played some ESPN Yahoo. How'd you hear about NFBC at that point?
Not completely sure. I think a high school friend and I wanted to get a little skin in the game, like find some money legs, and just stumbled across it. And I think he did it for like a year or two and kind of faded away into, I think he had family a lot earlier than I did, and commitments and mortgage and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that was the initial, just looking around and trying to find a league that with the level of competition be a little bit higher, and you can, kind of justify all the time you spend on it by saying that I can win a little bit of money.
All right, sounds good. So 2014, you joined one Draft Champions League. 2015, you joined two Draft Champions Leagues. 2016, you joined three leagues. In 2017, you joined 7 NFBC leagues. You won your first league title that year. You won a DC league title and a $250 DC auction league title. So again, we talked earlier, it takes a little while to get success, you think, but any advice for new players that may be afraid they're too late getting into the game?
No, not at all. Sorry, I do advise. I don't think they should worry about like being too late getting into the game. There probably were resources I could have taken advantage of and didn't look for, but like they're so much more prevalent, as we talked about now, and the learning curve, it's almost unfair. It seems like now, like I suffered and learned, trial by fire for a while, whereas people who take the time and put in the energy to find the good sources now can get a really strong base. There's still something you have to go through it. Some learning by doing is necessary, but you can get the principles kind of squared away by paying attention to the people that are analyzing it carefully.
So in 2018, you went out to the Arizona Fall League Symposium. Fantastic symposium, and it gets better every year. Baseball HQ does a great job there. You won 4 league titles that year. In fact, you finished second overall in the Draft Champions National Championship. What made you decide to go out there? And, it's a great fantasy baseball convention. You went out there, and now you're speaking on some panels and stuff. I mean, a nice transformation. What made you go out there for the first time?
Yeah, probably the best or the second best way to get out and meet people that share the passion and commitment. I say second best because, like, I think a fair number of people, I kind of can only justify one fantasy baseball trip per year. So now if I'm going to Las Vegas, I haven't actually been to Arizona for a couple of years. But yeah, it's just a lot of fun, get away, talk to people that care about the game, brainstorm. It's a great way to get your prep started because it does, happen so early, and they've got good panels and information, but also just like relax in the sun and watch a baseball game a couple afternoons. You can't go wrong there.
Yeah, when you got a season ahead of raking roughs, you go out there in November to enjoy the sun. So, all right, you won 9 NFBC league titles in 2019, folks. You can see the progression. He's getting better. He's getting better. He won a main event qualifier league. That's $125. Won a free entry. That was the first time he played the main event then, after you won that main event qualifier in 2019. What were your thoughts about stepping up into the main event at that point?
Yeah, I don't fully remember, but I think that it took a while. I wanted to have sustained success enough to convince myself that I could justify putting this much on a single league. So I didn't think it wasn't just getting lucky, that the method I had worked in the system that I was using in these other leagues worked well enough that it wasn't just burning the entry fee, that I had a decent chance that I could compete at that level as well. So I just needed to establish that with enough, success in a few years.
Well, you did well because 2020, obviously the COVID year, shortened MLB season, crazy year, but you won 9 NFBC league titles that year. You won your first NFBC main event league title. Yes, it was a sprint season, but you finished 37th overall. What do you remember from that league and, of course, that crazy season?
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. I mean, the baseball aspect of it, the fantasy aspect, I think was crazy in a fun way because it just added new decisions, new elements of strategy. Like how do you adjust? How are the players going to adjust for this shortened season? How do you adjust in terms of like certain stats? I think become more valuable and less valuable. Certain strategies work a little bit better, a little less well, and you're figuring all that out kind of in a short period of time. So it was an intense, kind of crazy like run up, but it was fun, a very good distraction, certainly during that time.
Yep. Yeah, it was a distraction. All right. All right. 2021, you won 5 more league titles, finished second in your main event league. You finished 28th overall at that time. Uh, it seemed like you had the draft champions format mastered. Now you're starting to get a little bit more in the main event format. 2022, you finished second overall in the main event. Yeah, you got her now. 2023, you won your New York main event league title, finished 10th overall. So with last year's main event league title, you've now won main event league titles in 3 straight years, 4 out of the last 5 years. Do you think people realize? I mean, they're calling you the robot. The robot's already taken, but do you think people realize that you're a force to be reckoned with now here?
Um, I don't know, most people don't care. In the very
I think they
small,
do. I think
in
they
the,
do.
in the very small community of people that do care, I think I'm sure I get whatever respect I deserve, which is probably like I'm not like Phil the robot. Like I don't, or like I'm not a star. I don't have like this system. I'm not doing anything like vastly different than anybody else. I'm just like putting in the work, like keeping my fundamentals sound, and kind of plugging away at it. It's nothing as interesting or like it's not worthy of the same kind of like admiration or awe as like Casey Chaw's system or like what Sean Johnson does at an auction and stuff like that. So like I don't deserve that kind of respect. So it's fine that I assume I get that kind of respect. But I'm a solid player and I'll keep playing a solid game, I hope.
I think you threw out 3 pretty good names right there and 3 pretty good examples as well. So, and Casey Cha is back this year. We're glad to have the Hall of Famer back in the NFBC. So, looking at that. All right, a couple of last things here. If we're setting KDS these days, what does it look like for you and why?
I think it's like 1 through 5, in some order, and then the back end. To me, it flattens out after that. I haven't even thought too much about which I prefer. I just tend to do 1 through 5 because, like, to spread things out, you're only gonna get so many chances at the first polls in KDS.
Right.
So if you
Right.
put 12, and then later you're gonna get 12 anyway.
Yeah.
So go for the early picks just to mix it up. I'm not really sure if that's exactly where I want to be in the main events, and things will change between now and then, like the pitching and the injuries and so forth. But currently, some order of 1 through 5, and then jump to the back end.
Well, that's exactly what Clark said earlier today. So
Yeah.
interesting that some people are avoiding the middle part and such. So starting pitchers you're seeing in the DCs. I mean, 1, maybe 2 starting pitchers in the first round, right? Skeens, maybe Skubal. When we get to the main event, do you expect that to change as it normally does?
Yeah, for sure. Virtually guaranteed that Crochet is going to move up into the first round, and maybe Wheeler more often than not, assuming health. I guess that would be it. I don't think there's anyone else who's really, unless I'm forgetting someone.
No.
That would be the maximum. But yeah, it'll it's predictable. But definitely adds another element.
Anything in the DCs that you're seeing as far as trends, where the closers are going, people taking 2 closers? I mean, Steve Goodwin did a great job out there with Toby in the AFL, talking about a lot of our national champions had 2 really good closers and didn't have to chase those saves all year long. Any trends you're seeing in DCs at this point like that?
Not really. I think in the DCs, I think that shift settled in a couple of years ago.
Right.
The closers. I think that for a long time there was a bias against it, but the numbers and the success kind of was obvious. It couldn't be denied after a while that as MLB was changing and that became the really locked in closer was a more rare resource. You had to pay up for it. So I think that's been about the same in terms of the strategy and people's willingness to do it. There's some who still won't, but there's a decent percentage who will. What changes is just the supply of that how many closers there are that are viewed as solid and locked in at any given time. But I think that the strategy, it doesn't seem vastly different to me this year than last year. I think that big shift was a couple years ago.
Yeah, the big shift, obviously, last year, the year before, was stolen bases. Has anything in your plan changed because of the amount of stolen bases, or is everybody just getting a little bit more from each player?
Yeah, I think I mean, I've heard it said by a lot of smart people, including I think like Mike Mager, that that they're available both later in the draft and in Fab as we start to think about Fab leagues. So you can put less emphasis on them early than previously, and I think that's about right. I haven't thought through all the strategy elements of it, but just in terms of the valuations and the projections, there's not as much of a priority on them or an SGP stat related valuation bump to those players as there used to be.
Yep. Well, we're about 5.5 weeks away from Las Vegas. Are you excited to go to the live events again? I mean, we're going to have a nice crowd. I mean, for the Saturday main event, we've got over 100 people right now. So should be fun. But thoughts on Vegas?
Yeah. Really looking forward to it. I think I fly a month from today.
Nice.
17th, right? Something like that. So it's time to start counting down the days. Definitely looking forward to it. Both for all the events and the fun, but it'll be nice to also get outside and feel some skin.
You and me both. You and me both for sure. Yeah. All right. Well, best of luck this year, Steve, and good luck in all your leagues, especially the CLQ championship. Everybody keep an eye on that. You're going to hear more about it, and it's fantastic. And we got 109 people in this year's going into next year's CLQ. So get your CLQ championship teams. Thanks a lot, Steve. Thanks for joining me on the podcast tonight.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
All right. Just a reminder that tomorrow at 8 Eastern, I'm going to be interviewing Jason Weir. He's the winner of the NFBC Online Auction Championship overall title. He was going to join me on Thursday, had a schedule conflict. Tomorrow's perfect. That's the only one I have tomorrow. So that interview will now be on Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. See you there with Jason Weir. Good night, everyone, and good luck in all your drafts.
Thank you for joining us on the High Stakes Fantasy Network podcast. To get in the game, go to playnfc.com.